So now we're going to talk about the structure and the functionality of the server. And that's, of course, the part out here on the right-hand side, which is going to implement all the different means of being able to give you back Yogi Berra quotes. So here's kind of what the controller looks like. You can see it's a class, and the class is annotated with a REST controller, which basically says this thing can be treated as something that can take incoming HTTP requests and dispatch them to the clients appropriately, to the service implementation methods appropriately. And that means you don't have to do all the work to handle inversion of control. Inversion of control will be handled for you by the Spring framework. There's a bunch of controller methods, get all quotes, get quotes, and then a couple of search methods. And all these things do is just basically convert to the appropriate native types and then forward to the service methods that actually do the work, or actually don't do the work. They forward to implementation methods that do the work. And as usual, we use the annotation, the get mapping annotation to indicate the router strings that are going to be used here in order to take the incoming HTTP request message and get it to the right controller endpoint handler method. Pretty kind of conventional stuff. Whenever we pass things like lists, we have to annotate them with a @request_param annotation so that Spring knows to pull the information out of the HTTP URL and then give it to the appropriate endpoint handler method. Again, this is just a quick recap. I think you know this by now. If you have things that are basically template parameters, you have to use a path variable annotation to indicate that it should ferret out that from the end of the URL. OK, so how is the BerraQuotes service structured? This looks actually very similar to the prime check example in that we've got the BerraQuotes service. And as you can see here, this has the @service annotation, which basically says we can do dependency injection. It'll set things up to do dependency injection. There's other stuff related to a dependency injection, which which you'll see in a second. And then we've got our array of strategies, which are going to be the different things that we do to actually do the concurrent processing. All of the service methods look very similar. They just take the incoming request and the parameter, which in this case is the strategy, and they go ahead and forward to the appropriate strategy implementation and then say, hey, get me all the quotes, please. This is what the implementation hierarchy looks like for this particular program. So you can see here we have this BerraQ abstract strategy, which has those 4 methods we saw before. And then we've got a sequential streams implementation. We have a parallel streams implementation. We have a parallel streams implementation with regular expressions. And then we have a structured concurrency implementation, which is more involved because, sadly, there's more ceremony with structured concurrency in some sense. But those are all the different things that we're going to talk about and walk through. So that's just a quick overview of how things are organized on the server side.